So, you couldn't sleep. Again, no judgment. Insomnia has existed since the Roman Empire. They just didn't have Wi-Fi to make it worse. Lucky for you, tonight's tale doesn't require alertness, just a soft pillow and a mildly questionable sense of curiosity. Like this sort of strange bedtime ritual? Nudge the like button and maybe subscribe if you keep finding yourself here at 2 a.m. Also, let me know where you're listening from and how far past midnight you've gone. Bonus points if you're under a blanket fort. Okay, deep breath, screen dimmed. Let's tiptoe into a piece of the past they definitely didn't cover in school. You arrive long after the bells have stopped, but something is still ringing. The monastery stands at the edge of the world. Not the literal one, not cliffs or oceans or stars, but the kind of edge that lives in the quiet between breaths. The world behind this wall is not louder, not brighter, not even newer. Just different, just unknowing. You arrive just after dawn. The sun is too pale to be trusted. It hides behind a shawl of cloud like it's afraid of what it might see. You are soaked with dew, chilled from the knees down and utterly alone, except of course for the silence. And the silence is not empty. The gate is half-rotted. Wood swollen with age, hinges rusted with prayer and rain. Someone left it ajar. That's the first wrong note. Monks close things. Doors, books, conversations. But this gate? Open. Just wide enough for you to pass through sideways as though squeezing into someone else's memory. You hesitate, not from fear, from knowing. Somewhere in your gut, where instinct gnaws and the old superstitions breed, you understand. He's still here, not alive, but not gone either. You push the gate. It doesn't resist, it just groans, like a throat clearing before confession. The courtyard is slick with morning moisture. Lichen curls along the stone walls. The well has been covered with an old board, and someone has nailed a wooden cross across it. Not over it, across it, like a lid, like a warning. The chapel door is closed, but it's not locked. You don't try it. Not yet. You're not here for sermons, you're here for his cell. Brother Aldric, that was the name in the letter. Scrawled in hurried ink as if the pen feared to write it too slowly. Come, he has died, but his work breathes. We can no longer contain it. That's all they said. They didn't sign it. You don't know who "we" is, but you came anyway, because that name Aldric has been echoing for years. Whispered in libraries, footnoted in strange tomes, mentioned only once aloud in your own childhood, when your mother caught you copying stars into a prayer book and whispered, "Be careful." That's how he started. His cell is at the far end of the cloister. You walk slowly, not out of reverence, but to give the building time to react. It does. The hallway breathes with mold and incense. Walls sweat faintly. Every footstep is muffled by ancient stone, and the silence grows thicker with each step, as though pressurizing, sealing in something. You round the final column. There, the door, still shut, still latched. From the inside, you knock. Not for formality, but for ritual, because he deserves that. Because you don't want to be the first noise he hears since dying. There's no answer. But your breath curls toward the threshold, and the candle stub mounted beside the door flickers, unlit. You reach for the latch. It's cold. Too cold. You open it. It opens easily, and the room exhales. It's not what you expected. Not monstrous, not alchemical or occult, just full. Every surface is covered in paper. Not scattered, arranged. Pages layered like feathers on a bird, each connected, each intentional. Drawings, diagrams. Scripture twisted into unfamiliar geometry. Ink, ink, ink. Black, blue, red, so much red. Not blood, but close enough to pretend. He is still there. Of course he is. Seated at the small writing desk, back curled like a question mark. He doesn't smell, not yet. The body is too well preserved or too protected. He holds a quill, mid-sentence. The page beneath his hand is half finished. The word trails off. You read it. It says beneath. You step inside. The floor doesn't creak. It absorbs. There is no dust. The candle wax hasn't melted down. Time is caught here. Paused. You move like a thief in your own dream. You circle him. His face is serene. Lips parted in what might be a smile or might be a warning. His eyes are closed, but his eyebrows are lifted, like he's still watching something behind them. His fingers are stained black, so are his teeth. He was chewing the quill again. Old habit, or perhaps a compulsion. You check the ink pot, still wet. The pages. You kneel beside the desk and lift the first. It crackles. Words etched in unfamiliar Latin, or a cipher, or something else. Below them, a diagram of a sun being eaten by a ring of thorns. Another page, a church tower with hands reaching from its belfry. Another, a circle of monks with no faces and a single eye drawn in their center. You turn page after page. None are titled. None are numbered. Some are stitched together with human hair. One is drawn on vellum scraped so thin it glows when held to the light. You hold it. There is no light in the room, and still it glows. You feel something shift, not in the room, in you, like a string tightening behind your sternum. You look up, he's still smiling, but now it looks different, less peaceful, more proud. You whisper involuntarily, "What did you see?" The candle beside the door lights. You freeze. No sound, no wind, no movement, just the candle, burning where it wasn't, flickering where there is no draft. And on the wall above the desk, a mark. You hadn't seen it before, a circle, drawn in charcoal or old ash, with 7 spokes radiating out like a wheel. No words, just a symbol. You look at him again. He has not moved, but something is leaning in. Not physically, just closer. You stand too quickly. The page in your hand crumples. You press it flat again, but the ink has already begun to fade. Just that page, just the one you touched. The words drip down the parchment like they're bleeding themselves out. You step backward, heart loud now. The silence is gone. Something has taken its place. Not before he wrote the end of the world. He saw it once in a fire before his 10th birthday. Before the monastery, before the manuscripts, before the long years spent spilling prophecy like ink over vellum. He was just a boy. A thin, quiet thing with eyes that lingered too long on burning candles. Eyes that didn't flinch when others looked away. Eyes that saw more than they were meant to. His name was Aldric, even then. No surname, no legacy. Only a mother with knotted fingers and a cough that never left her. Only a father who drank and prayed in equal measure and always loudly. They lived in a village tucked between nothing and nowhere, the kind of place God only passed through when he was headed somewhere else. There was a chapel, a field, a bell tower with no bell, and Aldric watching. They said he didn't cry at birth, just opened his eyes, not blinking, not squirming, just looking as if to say, "Ah, this again." The midwife crossed herself and whispered to his mother, "He's come from something, we're going toward it." He didn't speak much, not at first. When he did, it was always questions. Why do candles melt like dying men? Why does the priest lie when he blesses the dead? Why do stars fall? That last one came before anyone had seen one fall. 2 weeks later, a comet blazed across the sky like a wound that refused to close. People cheered, wished on it, named it. Aldric stood beneath it, barefoot in the snow, eyes burning with cold and something else. He didn't make a wish, he just watched. They called him strange. Not cruelly, just as a matter of fact. He didn't play with the others. He didn't cry when beaten. He drew circles in the dirt and whispered into them. Once a dog followed him into the woods and came back hours later, changed. Its eyes milky, its tail bitten off. It would not go near the chapel again. Neither would Aldric. Then came the fire. He was 9. The winter had cracked every stone in the village. Ice clung to the roof like a second sky. The hearths burned low, the wells froze, and then a spark. No one knew where it came from. Maybe a tipped candle, maybe a cursed breath, maybe Aldric. The barn caught first, then the hay cart, then the chapel roof, as if the flame were choosing. The villagers screamed, ran, tried to throw snow on it, tried to pray it away. Aldric, he walked toward it. They shouted at him. They reached, they pleaded. His mother fainted. He didn't hear them. He stepped barefoot across a path of glowing coals like they were paving stones. He stood in the barn doorway, hair curling from the heat, eyes wide. And then he spoke, loudly, clearly. The sky will split, the bells will drown, the stars will fall, the beasts will feast on men and not be satisfied. A moment later, the rafters collapsed behind him, not a scratch on him. He walked out smiling. That night, the wind stopped. Not slowed, stopped. Birds did not fly. Dogs did not bark. Even the river, a narrow, noisy thing that always ran like it was late, stood still. No one slept, except Aldric. He curled up beside the fire, warm and unburnt, and dreamed. His mother said he whispered numbers in his sleep, the same 3, over and over, 7, 3, 1, 7, 3, 1. No one knew what it meant, except maybe Aldric. But he never explained anything. Soon after, the priest came, not the village priest, a visitor, a robed man with parchment breath and heavy boots. He asked to see the boy. Aldric looked at him once and said, "You're too late." The man bowed. He left without another word. 3 nights later, Aldric's mother woke to the sound of a bell ringing. But the tower was empty. No bell had hung there in decades. She climbed it anyway. At the top, etched into the stone, were words, "He sees what we blind ourselves to." They hadn't been there the day before, and no one had tools fine enough to carve that way. By spring, Aldric had stopped eating meat, then bread, then anything from the village. He survived on roots and cold water. His bones began to show through his skin like scripture trying to escape the page. His father begged him to stop. Aldric kissed his hand. "I'm preparing," he said. "For what?" His father asked. "The noise." He was 10 when the monks came. 2 of them, wrapped in black, carrying no weapons, speaking softly. They didn't ask permission. They just waited at the edge of the field until Aldric walked to them. He didn't pack. He didn't say goodbye. He just nodded. And the 3 of them walked away without a sound. No one knows what happened during the journey to the monastery. No one knows where they stopped or what was spoken, or what Aldric did when the stars came out. But the monks returned alone. They never said what happened to the second boy they'd been meant to take. Just that he had turned back. Aldric didn't. He walked straight through the gate, right into his room. And that's where the silence began. Years later, monks would whisper about him. He walks like someone who's seen the last page. He speaks to the wall in Hebrew, though he's never studied it. His eyes reflect candlelight even when they're closed. They called him cursed. They called him sainted. They never called him boy again, because boys do not speak with the voice of endings. And Aldric did. Still listening? Then remember this, he did not become a prophet. He was never made. He was born already looking the wrong way, not toward life, but toward what comes after. And he was patient. All seers must be. They carry the weight of what's ahead. Long before the world believes them. Sleep now. You'll meet him again soon. He's still watching. The relics did not speak until he entered the room. The monastery kept its relics in a locked chamber behind the altar, a place thick with incense and unease, where the bones of long-dead saints sat coiled in velvet boxes, sealed behind wax and silver, heavy with reverence and rot. Most monks visited only on feast days. Few entered alone. None lingered. It was a place of containment, not curiosity. You did not look too long. You did not touch. You did not ask questions. Because bones should stay quiet, and faith, true faith, didn't require answers. But Aldric was not a man of quiet belief. He was a listener. And bones, it turned out, have much to say. If you're willing to hear it, it began during Lent, when voices are low, meals sparse, and the silence grows more honest. He had been seen pacing near the reliquary at dusk, lips moving, not in prayer, in conversation. The brothers assumed he was reciting scripture, until they realized the scripture he recited wasn't in any known book. The reliquary door, once locked with ritual, was found ajar, just slightly, enough to let something in or something out. The key was untouched, the wax seal unbroken, the chain undisturbed, but the door open, and Aldric inside, kneeling before a shattered glass case. The femur of St. Aurelius clutched in his trembling hands. His face was wet, not from tears, from sweat, and his mouth, whispering a name that had not been spoken in that monastery for 2 centuries, a name that no one alive should have known. They did not punish him, not openly, not yet. But the prior watched him more closely. The other monks began eating elsewhere. Some left small crosses outside their doors at night, and one, a gentle, stuttering scribe named Brother Aldric, begged Aldric to stop. "You're touching fire," he said, voice cracking. "Not fire," Aldric replied. "Teeth." The next night, Brother Aldric went missing. They searched for hours. Finally, they found him in the catacombs, face down on the cold floor, mouth full of dust and paper. He had eaten 3 pages from the monastery's only book of hours. When they pulled them from his throat, they found letters scratched into his tongue, 7 of them, spelled backward. They did not form a word, but Aldric knew what it meant. He simply said, "They're not done speaking." After that, no one asked where he was at night. The reliquary stayed open, or at least it opened itself. Sometimes monks passing by would hear humming, or soft crying, or the creak of bone on stone. No one entered, not even the prior. They knew it was Aldric. And Aldric was listening. He began cataloging the bones, not by name or saint or origin, by sound. Some hummed, some clicked, some gave off heat. He mapped them, connected them, arranged them in new constellations when no one was looking. And once, only once, he rearranged them into a circle on the stone floor, sat in the center, closed his eyes, and did not move for 2 days. When he rose, he vomited water, salt water. Though the monastery stood nowhere near the sea, he began writing more feverishly after that. Not scripture, not theology, not commentary, just images. A cracked skull with roses growing from its sockets, a femur resting atop a burning church. Hands, always hands, reaching out of tombs to touch the feet of angels too afraid to look down. He left them beneath the bones, tucked beneath jawbones, pressed between ribs, wrapped around finger bones like paper rosaries. Some monks found them, burned them. Others kept them, under their pillows, inside their robes, against their skin. Those who burned the drawings grew pale, tired. One lost his voice entirely. Those who kept them dreamed of cities on fire, of blood raining upward, of faces without eyes. They stopped speaking to Aldric, but they did not return the drawings. The prior finally confronted him, cornered him in the cloister beneath the ruined fresco of the martyrdom of Saint Sebastian. He asked no questions, gave no reprimand, just said, "You're unmaking what was already sacred." Aldric looked up at him calmly and said, "The sacred is a borrowed shape. The truth is bone." The prior struck him, only once, but when he turned to leave, he stumbled, slipped, and broke his ankle on the 3rd step. Later that night, monks said they heard laughing from beneath the reliquary floor. Aldric was confined to his cell, not punished, just contained. But he didn't resist, because by then, he didn't need the bones anymore. They had already taught him what he came to learn. His dreams grew louder. He no longer needed relics. He had become one. Some say he began removing parts of himself, small things, clippings of fingernail, strands of hair. Once, a tooth. They say he buried them beneath the altar, not as offerings, as anchors, so that when the end came, and it would, a piece of him would already be in the right place. Still with me? Still breathing? Then listen. Bones remember. They hold weight, not just the weight of flesh, but of time, of prayer, of expectation. A saint's finger, carried across centuries, still remembers what it once pointed at. And Aldric, he pointed it somewhere new, somewhere we're still afraid to look. Sleep now. Don't think about your own bones. Don't wonder what they're whispering about you. Just rest. And if you feel a hum beneath your pillow tonight, it's probably nothing. Probably. It started with a flat note, then silence, then something else entirely. The monastery was built for sound. You wouldn't think it, stepping into its hush-heavy halls, wrapped in woolen silence and the dull scrape of sandals. But the building, its stones, its arches, its chapel vault, was tuned like a great instrument, a cathedral of air and echo. The choir was the heart of it. 30 voices trained for harmony, 30 mouths shaped for scripture, 30 souls united by breath and fear and rhythm, until Aldric joined, and the notes began to change. He was never meant to sing, not because he lacked voice. His tone, by all accounts, was clear, strong, not beautiful, not warm, but resonant, like a bell rung deep underground. It wasn't his sound that disturbed them. It was the silence after he sang. That pause between notes, too long, too heavy, too full, as if something had stopped to listen. The choir master, Brother Matthias, noticed it first. His hand would hover in the air, waiting for the next measure, and then falter. His fingers would twitch, his breath would catch. He began to lose the tempo, to mistrust the pitch, to sweat even when the chapel was cold. He didn't blame Aldric, not at first. He just started shifting practice times, then benches, then solos. Then quietly he asked the prior, could the boy be excused? The prior refused. Aldric was to be included. He needed community, structure. But what Aldric needed was silence, and soon he'd have it. The first full silence came during Advent, a solemn service, a sacred hour. The choir robed in winter whites, candles flickering, smoke curling toward the beams like slow, sleepy spirits. The hymn, Veni, Veni, Emmanuel. Aldric stood in the third row, eyes closed, hands still, lips parted. He opened his mouth to join the verse, and no sound came out. Not from him, not from the monks beside him, not from the choir at all. The notes stopped, not stumbled, not faltered, stopped, as if the chapel had been sealed in wax. The organist pressed keys. Nothing. A monk tried to cough. He couldn't. The silence was solid, complete, utter. You could scream in it, but the scream would die in your throat. It lasted 12 seconds, then returned, like a wave breaking all at once. The hymn resumed, voices staggered, some wept, one fainted. Aldric, he opened his eyes, smiled, and whispered, "It hurt us." After that, practice became punishment. No one sang beside him. The notes bent strangely near his pitch, chords warped, voices cracked. They moved him to the back row, then the vestibule. Then they asked him not to come at all. He agreed. And still they heard his voice, not in the chapel, in dreams, in echoes, in the quiet between bell tolls. Brother Matthias lost his hearing, not all at once, just the top notes, then the harmonies, then the middle. Soon he could only hear one thing, a low hum, constant, inescapable, like someone singing a single, endless vowel under the earth. He was found in the crypt one morning, curled beside an empty sarcophagus, weeping blood from one ear. He wrote over and over, "He's not singing to us." Services changed. No more full choir, hymns shortened, no solos, no plain song, only whispered psalms and communal murmurs, like a room of men too afraid to speak above a hush. Because every time someone tried to sing, truly sing, they felt it, that pause, that presence, as if Aldric's voice had made room for something else, something that wanted in. One monk tried to confront him, Brother Thomas, young, bold, still full of flame. He slammed his hands on Aldric's table one dusk and shouted, "What are you doing to us?" Aldric looked up, slowly, eyes calm, voice calm. "The psalm was always a door," he said. "You just never opened it properly." Thomas left shaking. That night he awoke to the sound of singing beneath his bed. He was moved to another cell. The singing followed. They found him a week later, tongue torn out, stuffed into a jar of beeswax. On the floor, written in ash, "Too loud." No one sang after that. The choir dissolved. Voices were hoarded like contraband. The monastery fell into hush and chant and prayer mouth but never spoken. Even the bells began to sound. Off. Not cracked, just different. Lower, slower. A tone that clung. Aldric remained silent, for years, but they heard him anyway. The walls began to echo without cause. Scripture read aloud came back with unfamiliar cadence. One brother, reading from the Psalms, found the words on the page shifting, becoming lyrics. Strange ones, in no language he knew. He tried to write them down. His hand broke at the wrist, clean, without impact, just snapped, as if something objected. They locked the hymnals away. They burned the vellum chants. The organ keys were nailed down. The choir loft sealed shut. Still the wind sometimes whistled scales. Still the rain tapped rhythms. Still Aldric sat in his cell at night and listened. You want to believe this is metaphor, that silence is just silence, that voices fail because of fear or rot or age. But the truth is simpler and worse. Sound is a passage, and Aldric had become a gate. He never hummed, never whistled, never muttered. But once, only once, a monk swore he heard him singing backwards, just 2 notes, barely audible, but wrong in a way that twisted his stomach into knots. He never went near the chapel again. He wrote in his final confession, "His melody is not for us, it's a key and the lock is beneath the floor." Still here? Still reading? Then hush. Listen, can you hear it? That little echo in your breath, that soft warble in the walls? That's nothing, or it's the first note. And Aldric's waiting for you to sing the second. Sleep now, and try not to hum in your dreams. You never know who's listening. His hands bled before the ink dried, and still he wrote. There were too many pages. That was the first sign. No one had given Aldric parchment. No one had seen him request it, steal it, barter for it. And yet the stack grew daily. Fine vellum, stained, curled at the edges as if they'd aged decades in the space of a night. Some believed he was repurposing old scrolls. But even the oldest archives hadn't contained this much stock. And then someone looked closely. One sheet, peeled carefully from the floor beneath his cot, revealed a watermark. Not from a paper mill. A thumbprint, charred around the edges, pressed into the fibers. Not Aldric's. Wider, uneven, like it belonged to a hand that had never been human. He didn't use a desk. He wrote on the floor, on the walls, on himself. When they came to clean his cell, they found lines of verse scratched into the underside of his sleeping mat, trailing onto the stone in looping, fevered script. Latin. Yes, but broken, bent. Words collapsed into one another like drunk monks on a feast day. And between them, glyphs. Some ancient, some entirely new. Symbols that shimmered when touched, that blurred when you tried to copy them, that sang if you stared too long. His quills broke faster than they could be replaced. Feathers snapped in half. Ink pots dried out moments after being filled. Even the lead stylus bent backward, warped into crescent shapes as if the metal recoiled from what it was made to transcribe. So Aldric adapted. He used bark, bone slivers, nails, a broken comb, and when desperate, his own finger. His nails turned black first, then peeled away, then grew back, thinner, sharper, translucent, like the wings of dead beetles. He didn't complain, he didn't flinch. Only once did he murmur, half-conscious during one of his longer writing trances, "My hand is no longer mine." They asked what he was writing. He smiled. Not what, when. They stopped asking. The manuscripts were impossible to catalog, not because they weren't labeled, but because they wouldn't stay still. You could stack them, sort them, press them between boards, and by morning they'd be elsewhere. Filed in the library's Greek section, folded into choir books, stuffed into the mouths of saint statues. Once, one was found nailed to the chapel door, inward. As if the manuscript wanted to read the monastery, they burned a few, just to be sure. The flames hissed like oil on water. The air filled with a smell like sweet rot and damp moss. One monk claimed to see a face in the smoke, not screaming, smiling, mouth open wide. He didn't sleep after that. His eyes dried out, and still they wouldn't close. They tried burying the rest. Shovels, holy water, 3 feet deep, wrapped in sackcloth. The next day, the grave was open, neatly. No dirt disturbed, The manuscripts were gone. Later that week, they began to drip from the rafters, one by one, falling like dead leaves onto candlelit prayers. Brother Hamill lost his mind after opening one. He found it pressed inside the folds of his habit. It pulsed once when he touched it. Inside, not words, images, etchings of hollow cities, crosses floating in black water, and one page that showed the monastery, empty, roofless, eclipsed. He stared too long. He bled from the gums. They found him scratching circles into the wall with his teeth. He refused to speak after that, just hummed, low, like a monk remembering a hymn from before the world was made. The prior tried to seal the cell, brick and mortar, wards, charms, prayer, none of it held. Aldric always reappeared, in the garden, in the crypt, in the bell tower, sitting quietly, writing, on leaves, on dust, on bones. One brother found the entire Lord's Prayer rewritten across a sheep's skull. Each letter made of ants. Still moving, they gave up sealing the room. Instead they watched, waited, transcribed. A small group of curious monks, foolish, brave, or both, began copying his work by hand. They called themselves the Pale Order. They whispered theories that the texts were prophetic, that Aldric had tapped into something ancient, something beneath Scripture, a foundation of truth. They wore gloves to copy, fasted before each session. Still, one of them vanished, gone. Bed undisturbed, cloak folded, shoes still by the door. In his place, a single manuscript, bound in lambskin, wet to the touch. No one dared open it. They placed it in the reliquary. The next day, it was gone. Aldric had it, was writing in it, smiling. One night, lightning struck the scriptorium, split the roof, cracked the lectern. Nothing burned, except 3 manuscripts Aldric had discarded. They did not blacken. They turned to glass, inside, frozen ink, motionless, still legible. They glowed for a week, then crumbled. Dust sharp enough to cut skin. Eventually, even Aldric's hands gave out. They blistered, tore. He bled constantly. He wrapped them in cloth and kept writing. He bit through his lower lip one night, not from pain, but because he had begun whispering while writing, and his mouth moved too fast. He wrote without looking, without thinking. The words knew themselves. He was just a vessel. The final manuscript he wrote that month, or what they assumed was final, was different. Bound in old hide, sealed with wax and twine. It smelled of iron and lavender. A monk reached for it. It burned his hand. Another touched it with tongues. The metal melted. No one tried again. Aldric called it the Hour Book. He placed it on the chapel altar himself and wept, not in pain, but like someone at a funeral, his own perhaps. Still awake? Still tracing the shape of your breath with your fingertips? Then remember this. Some books do not tell stories. They become them. Aldric's manuscripts weren't written for you. They were written for what comes after you. Sleep now. Let the ink dry on your skin. You'll be writing soon enough. No bell rang, no gate opened, but they were inside. It was the 3rd hour of night prayers when the first monk noticed them. Brother Ives, a pale man with a limp and a nose perpetually red from incense, glanced up between verses of Psalm 130, De profundis clamaviad te Domine, and saw 3 figures standing silently at the back of the chapel. He did not hear them arrive. No sandals on stone, no creak of hinges, no breath, just the 3 of them. Still as statues, shrouded in travel cloaks that looked older than the abbey itself. He blinked, looked again, and they were closer. They had no faces, not entirely. Features, yes, arranged where they should be. Eyes where eyes belong. Mouths closed. Skin pale and stretched like wax wrapped around ash. But no expression, no tension, no lines from laughter or age or thought, as if they had worn their own faces smooth from too many years. One held a staff, another held a book. The third, nothing at all. And yet he was the most unnerving, because his hands were missing. The monks did not stop their prayers, not out of reverence, but paralysis. Their mouths moved, their throats did not. No sound emerged. The chapel once again was silenced, and the three figures stepped forward, uninvited, unannounced, unquestioned. They walked like they remembered how, but not well. The movements too fluid, too delayed, as if their joints were catching up to choices made seconds before. They stopped at the altar. Aldric was already there, waiting. No one had seen him enter either. He was seated in the high-backed chair usually reserved for the abbot, long since dead and unmourned. He did not rise. He simply raised a hand, scarred with dried ink, and said, "You're early." No one else heard their reply. But Aldric nodded, turned his head slightly, and gestured to the floor before him. They knelt, all three, simultaneously, perfectly. Like monks trained to obedience long before breath ever reached their lungs. The monks fled, one by one, no screams, no warnings, just quiet terror, the kind that moves the body without the brain's permission. They hid in corners, in closets, in the cold space behind the crypt's door where the dead never lingered long. Aldric remained, and with the three figures kneeling before him, he began to recite. Not scripture, not prophecy, names, endless names. He did not look at the book they brought. He did not pause to breathe. Just name after name after name, spilling from him like water from a cracked cistern. The air grew heavy. The candles dimmed. One monk swore he saw moss growing on the altar steps. The visitors remained motionless, until the moment Aldric said, "My own." Then, and only then, the one without hands stood and bowed. They left the way they came, without a door, without a sound, except for one. The third figure, the one with the book, dropped a single page on the chapel floor as he turned. Not parchment, not vellum. Something, papery, coarse and warm. It had no ink, but bled, slowly, steadily. From the center outward, the monks refused to touch it. They surrounded it with candles, then with salt, then with prayers carved into the flagstone itself. Still every morning, the page moved, an inch closer to the altar. By the sixth day it had begun to dry, curling at the edges, darkening like meat left too long in the sun. By the seventh it had folded itself into the shape of a tongue, and on its surface the faint imprint of words, "He wrote us back." The visitors were not seen again, not as clearly, but signs persisted. Footprints in the cloister after fresh snow, though no one had left the dormitories. 3 robes found hanging on the same branch of the ancient tree behind the scriptorium. A monk who woke to find salt packed into his shoes, and the faint outline of a hand pressed into his chest, cold as stone. He died that week, smiling, with ink staining his teeth. The prior called for exorcism. The rites were read, the relics paraded. The incense swung in wild arcs that made the younger monks cough and the older ones weep. Aldric did not attend. Instead, he sat by the gate, waiting, watching, writing. One night the gate was open, not wide, just ajar. The iron lock untouched, the hinges unbent, but the stone around it was cracked, as if the wall itself had inhaled. And standing in the doorway, a mirror. Rough, full length, polished with dust and bone. No reflection showed, except one, Aldric's. Even when no one else could see him, the monks debated smashing it, but each time they approached, the mirror changed, became a window, then a frame, then a door. Not metaphorically, literally. One novice reached forward. His hand passed through. He did not scream, but when he pulled it back, it was older, veined, shaking, bent with age. He took vows the next morning, and never spoke again. Aldric watched it all, calm, unblinking, like someone witnessing rain on stone. When asked what it meant, he simply said, "Visitors always leave something behind. Still awake? Still sure your home is locked tight? Then remember this. Not all who enter need doors. Not all who knock want answers. Sometimes they only want silence. Sometimes they only want to sit beside you and wait. Sleep now. If you hear footsteps tonight, don't check the hall. It's already too late. They're inside." It rang only once, but they heard it for the rest of their lives. There were no bells scheduled to ring that night, no feast, no funeral, no midnight mass. And yet, at precisely the darkest point between vespers and matins, when even the candle stubs had burned low and the oil in the lamps had curled into soot, it rang, low, long, wrought deep, a sound not carried by air but by stone, through floorboards, through foundations, through the marrow of the monks asleep in their cells, not above, not from the tower, but from beneath. Brother Gale sat up so fast he bit his tongue. Brother Thomas, half dreaming, rolled off his cot and broke a rib. Brother Aldric, who hadn't spoken since the visitors, opened his mouth and screamed a single word, again. But the bell did not oblige. Once was enough. There was no bell beneath the abbey. Everyone knew that. The bell tower held 3, one for morning, and one for all that fell between, but none below. Certainly not in the catacombs, certainly not beneath the stone, and yet they heard it, not in memory, in echo. For days after, the walls hummed softly at midnight. Chalices trembled on wooden shelves. Water in basins rippled when no hand touched them. One monk dropped a crucifix. It shattered. Not like wood, like glass. Aldric, of course, was already awake, sitting cross-legged in the chapel, bare feet on the cold floor, ink flaking from his fingertips. He smiled when they told him what they'd heard. It wanted you to know it was listening. They asked him what it meant. He pointed to the ground. The stone remembers. The prior ordered an investigation. 6 monks with shovels, one with holy water, one with doubts he would not voice. They began in the cellar, dug until their hands blistered and their prayers ran dry. They found bones. Human, animal, some, but no bell. Just a shaft. Narrow. Descending into dark, packed soil and something older than faith. The first monk who peered down it vomited. The second wept. The third said nothing, but refused to ever speak again. They sealed it, or tried to. The bricks would not set, the mortar would not hold. By morning, the hole was wider, and the hum stronger. Aldric visited the hole. He sat beside it for 3 nights. Did not eat, did not sleep, did not write. On the 4th morning he rose, walked to the scriptorium, and wrote a new prayer. It was unlike any they'd seen. No saints' names, no Latin, no amen. Just a spiral of words tightening inward. When read aloud, it induced vertigo. One monk collapsed, another bled from the nose. A third, newly transferred, still hopeful, tried to memorize it. He spent the night scratching symbols into his skin with a splintered comb. They locked the prayer away, buried it, burned it, buried it again. Still it reappeared, folded into psalters, scratched into pews, pressed into the margins of innocent texts. Always the same spiral, always leading inward, as if language had become a path, and something beneath the abbey was inviting them down. The bell rang again, not aloud, but through dreams. Monks awoke clutching their ears, some bled, some smiled. A novice named Julin was found kneeling beside the chapel font, arms outstretched, mouth agape. He had swallowed a candle, whole. The prior banned all descent into the catacombs, not for safety, for sanity, but something had already come loose. Cracks appeared in the floor, fine at first like spider webs, then wider, then shaped, not random, carved, as if someone or something was writing upward from the dark. They tried to sing again, a hymn of purification, faltering, unpracticed, desperate. The moment the note struck D minor, the floor split. A thin line, no more than a paper's width, but deep, endless. Aldric stepped to the edge and peered down, then whispered, "It's not a bell, it's a throat." From then on, every night at the same hour, the sound returned, not ringing, not quite, more like breathing. Stone expanding, earth exhaling, the abbey remembering something it tried for centuries to forget. One evening, the bell tower collapsed, not in a storm, not in decay. It fell inward, as if swallowed. At its center, a hole, leading into black soil. The monks gathered, prayed, wept. Aldric stepped forward, held up a page, not written in ink, scratched, charred, pulsing faintly. The words read, "This is the first sound." They asked him what would come next. He looked up, eyes darker than candlelight. The answer, "Still with me? Still in one piece?" Then listen closely, because you've heard it too. That sound beneath your floor, that shiver in your bones when silence lingers too long. It's not your house settling, it's not your heart, it's a bell. One that rings from below, one that remembers your name. Sleep now, let it echo, let it call, just don't answer. Miracles are just hauntings we've come to accept. You weren't supposed to touch the reliquary, but no one ever really listened to that rule. Not truly. Not when you'd walk past it 100 times a day. Not when your fingers itched with superstition. Not when you believed even for a moment that the bones inside could hear you. It was carved oak, trimmed in iron, polished smooth by generations of silent hope. Inside, the shattered remains of St. Oran's femur, a lock of St. Beatrix's hair, and a fragment of what may or may not have once been St. Enoch's tongue. There were others, unmarked, unverified, but still holy, if only because we said so. And they had always been still, always quiet, until the bell rang, until the soil split, until the choir forgot how to sing and Aldric started writing in circles. The first monk who noticed anything wrong was Brother Henry. He'd been polishing the reliquary lid, a quiet chore, something done on cold mornings when the prayers came slow, when he felt it, warmth. Not much, not fire, not fever, just the unmistakable thrum of life where there should have only been stillness. He withdrew his hand. The warmth remained. He whispered a prayer. The reliquary whispered back, not in words, in movement. A soft shifting inside, a nudge against the inner lid, as if something old and brittle had just rolled over and sighed. He told no one, not right away. But over the next 3 days, 5 other monks reported noises. A soft tapping beneath the stone altar, a rhythmic rasping from behind the reliquary wall, a single sharp knock at midnight from inside the sealed saint's chamber. Each swore it must be rats, or wind, or memory. But each of them avoided the relic room afterward. Each of them began to pray a little faster, a little shallower, with one eye open. Aldric was seen standing in the chapel vestibule one evening, head cocked to the side, listening, not to the bell, not to the wind, but to the relics. "They're dreaming again," he said, "but it's not their dream anymore." Brother Matthias, who had once sung alto before his hearing bled away, was assigned to sit watch near the relics, to ease concern. He didn't mind. He had no ears for whispers. He sat still for hours, until one morning they found him curled on the floor, surrounded by a ring of teeth. None of them were his. None of them matched any monk living or buried in the abbey. They were infant-sized, but weathered, old. The relic chamber smelled faintly of myrrh and burnt milk. The prior considered removing the relics, but no one would carry them, not out of fear, out of weight. They had grown heavier. Each reliquary, once easy to lift, now refused to be moved, pressed down into the stone like roots wrapping a coffin. One novice tried prying one free with a crowbar. His hands blistered on contact, the iron curled like wax. He wept for 2 days, murmuring in languages no one had taught him. When asked what he heard, he replied, lullabies. The saints began to shift in the records. Their names changed slightly. St. Oran became St. Orax. St. Beatrix became Beatrix the Hollow. St. Enoch just vanished. The painted frescoes in the apse blurred, not faded, blurred, as if the saints themselves had begun to move. Their faces softened, elongated. One lost its eyes completely, and the sockets darkened into ink pools. Still the monks prayed. What else was there to do? One relic, a finger bone said to be St. Dorella's, cracked open overnight. Inside, not marrow, not dust, but a tiny curled scroll, unmarked, soft as silk. When unrolled, it revealed a single line of red ink. "You made us holy. We never agreed." Aldric stopped writing. For one day, just sat in the nave, staring at the reliquaries. When asked why, he smiled sadly. "They were never ours," he said. "They only borrowed us." Then the miracles began. Not the good kind, not bleeding statues or glowing palms. These were stranger, colder. A monk vomited rose petals for 3 hours. Another lost all his teeth in his sleep and woke with different ones. Older, sharper, filed. Brother Ives stood up during Compline and recited an entire gospel no one recognized, in a tongue no one could name, then sat down and tore the page from his mouth. It bled for days. They burned it. It reappeared, tattooed on Aldric's spine. The relics began to hum, low, beneath hearing, but just enough to make the walls vibrate. Candles swayed, wine turned, ink spoiled. Brother Galen, tasked with illuminating a new set of psalms, watched as every letter he scribed morphed mid-stroke into the same word, over and over: return. By now, no one entered the relic room. They kept the door shut, then sealed, then bricked over. But the sounds remained, tapping, sighing, the slow, soft shuffle of bones rearranging themselves. On the final night of that long, wrong season, the bell rang again, once, below, and the bricked wall crumbled inward. No explosion, no quake, just a breath. Dust settled, and in the empty chamber, the reliquaries untouched, all open, every lid lifted, every container empty, but still warm, as if whatever had once lain inside had only just risen and left, quietly, on their own terms. Still listening, still pretending your bones are your own? Then remember, sainthood is not consent, sanctity is not silence, and no relic rests forever. Sleep now, hold yourself tightly. Your hands may not feel like yours in the morning. Gravity is a courtesy, it was never a promise. It began with the river, not the sky, not the clouds, not a storm. The river turned first. At dawn, it was still flowing eastward as it always had, away from the abbey toward the lowlands and the long-forgotten Roman roads. By midday it had slowed. By vespers it stopped. By dusk it began to crawl backward. The fish didn't swim upstream. They drifted, belly up, as if being called. Then the fog came, from the ground, thick, silver-laced, smelled like wet parchment, and teeth pulled too soon. It coiled around tree trunks and slithered through the cloisters. The monks who inhaled it too deeply began coughing up water, brackish, full of silt, and small, translucent worms that squirmed back toward the earth when spat upon the floor. Brother Jan, a man of strong lungs and weak faith, looked at the fog and muttered, "This isn't weather, this is memory." Then came the rain, but not from above. It rose from the soil, tiny droplets at first, bubbling out of the cracks like dew, then mist, then arcs of fluid that lifted skyward, defying every scripture and science the monks had clung to. It was not water. It was cooler, slicker. It left no dampness, only a faint trail of language behind it, curling letters that faded before they could be read. Aldric watched from the refectory. He dipped a finger into a rising droplet, tasted it, then whispered, "Ink." The birds were the next to notice. They fell upward, one by one, not soaring, not escaping, but simply ascending, wings stiff, necks bent as if crucified on nothing. They hovered for a moment, like beads on a broken rosary, then dissolved, not into feathers, not into blood, but into sound, small bright chirps that rang for a moment in the back of your skull, and then were gone. The abbey's bells followed, not the forbidden one deep beneath the earth, the real ones. The ones still in their tower, rusted and moss-kissed, their ropes frayed by decades of reluctant hands. They rang, on their own, without wind, without human touch, and their tones rose upward visibly like smoke, curled into the sky. Each note left a scar in the clouds, a line, a wrinkle in the shape of a mouth half remembered. The rain thickened. Now it came in columns, spiraling, shivering. It passed through roofs, through stone, through skin. One monk, Brother Corin, caught a full stream in his chest. He froze, then rose, 4 feet off the ground, and laughed. Not kindly, not cruelly, just too loud, too long, as if something inside him had just remembered what it was. When he finally floated back down, his robe was dry, his feet were gone. The prior collapsed, mid-chant, his last words, "How do you bless the sky when it disobeys?" He was buried without ceremony. No one could keep candles lit long enough. The flame always turned to smoke, and the smoke always went down. Aldric remained in the courtyard, watching, writing. He'd carved a spiral into the flagstones using nothing but a fingernail. Inside it, a bowl. Inside the bowl, rain. Perfectly still, perfectly silent. He stared into it for hours. When Brother Elian dared to interrupt, Aldric didn't look away. He only said, "It's not falling, it's remembering which way it came." Then the reflections began, not in mirrors, in puddles, in bowls, in the curve of a monk's eye when he blinked too slowly. You'd look into a drop and see something that wasn't there. A forest you've never walked in, a tower you've never climbed, a version of yourself missing fingers or teeth or time. And sometimes the reflection moved, when you didn't. Brother Orland slit his wrists and leaned over a basin to die. What he saw instead made him scream. He survived. He won't speak, but he never drinks again. Not even holy water. Especially not holy water. The rain grew teeth, not metaphorical, tiny white specks in each upward droplet, molar-like. Baby teeth, maybe? Some monks claimed they heard whispers coming from the sky. Others said it was the ground murmuring in confusion. Still others said it was just Aldric humming. Until they realized Aldric wasn't moving his mouth. The rain was humming him. The abbey's trees turned inside out, leaves on the roots, bark curling upward in long, wet shivers. One tree split open entirely and revealed, at its core, a vertebrae column not belonging to any known animal. It pulsed once, then melted into ash. The ashes flew upward, like birds, like ink, like prayers in reverse. Aldric's robes never got wet. The rain avoided him, curved around his skin, never touched his face. He smiled at it like an old friend. When asked why he seemed so calm, he replied, "Because I wrote the weather down, and it read itself back." By the seventh night, all water in the abbey was gone. Wells dry, cisterns echoing, even the wine had vanished, leaving behind only the smell of forgotten grapes and something like teeth. The rain still fell, upward, but there was nothing left to drink, nothing to baptize with, nothing to boil. Only the air remained, and even that was beginning to twitch. The novices began to tie stones to their belts, not out of fear, out of hope, to stay grounded, to remain human, to remind themselves which way was down. One by one, they disappeared anyway, floating like puppets into the dust. The world didn't go dark, it simply closed its eyes. It started with a shadow, which was not unusual. Shadows are faithful, they cling, they whisper in the shape of your form, but this one did not move with you. It stayed behind when you turned. It grew longer when the sun rose, and at noon, when the light was at its peak, it stretched so far it began to bleed into other shadows, until there was only one, long, wide, and not yours. Brother Luthien first noticed it while tending to the garden. He looked up to find no shade cast by the trees, no contrast, no flicker, no flutter. The leaves were visible, the wind was real, but their shadows were missing, as if light had forgotten how to measure, as if the world had decided it was tired of seeing. At sext, the sky began to pulse. Once every 5 breaths, the sun dimmed, not behind clouds, not behind mist, but behind something closer. A soft veil, a whisper of dark lace stretched over the heavens, barely there, almost imagined. But the warmth waned, and the light softened, and the world grew colder, as if the sun had been dipped in ink. Aldric did not come to prayers. The chapel was dim, the windows pale, the candles seemed shy, afraid to burn too bright. Brother Clement muttered a psalm he half remembered. Brother Theo stopped halfway through a hymn and said aloud, "I don't think this is dusk." No one answered, because the shadows were gone, because the light had turned to smoke, and smoke does not cast truth, only doubt. By none the sun flickered, like a flame dying, or a reel skipping, or a memory on the cusp of rot. And then it stuttered, paused, resumed, and the birds stopped singing, not fled, not frightened, just silent, like they'd forgotten the song, like their throats had filled with dust. Aldric was found standing in the courtyard, arms lifted, mouth slightly open. He wasn't praying, he wasn't smiling, he was listening. When Brother Durrell approached, Aldric whispered, "It's chewing." The monks looked up and saw the sun, half gone, not eclipsed, not covered, not swallowed whole, but eaten. The edge frayed, the rim blackened, like bark gnawed from a tree, like parchment nibbled by mice, like something ancient had taken a first bite and savored it. The light bent. People forget how fragile sunlight is, how easy it is to bruise. That day, it bruised violet, blue at the edges, pale green at the heart. Shadows returned, but they moved sideways. Against logic, against you. You could watch your own silhouette reach for you, and then miss. Brother Eli wrote a note on a scrap of vellum. The sky has turned its back. He tucked it in the pages of a psalter and climbed the bell tower. What he saw made him kneel, not in fear, in awe. The sun was peeling, like a fruit, skin curling back, core leaking. But no light inside, only depth, like staring down a well that went through heaven and back out the other side. He rang the bell, once, then walked back down and never spoke again. They tried lighting more candles, but fire bent away from the wick, licked sideways, curved toward the door. Even flame was confused. Aldric returned to the scriptorium. He opened no books, he simply drew a circle, then another inside it, then another, and another. 17 in total, all identical, all humming softly when touched. He looked up at Brother Niles, who had come to ask him what was happening. "The sun is not a god," Aldric said. "It's a seal, and something's finished reading." The plants died by dusk, not wilted, curled, like they were hiding, or praying, or trying not to be seen. The grass rolled itself flat, the vines twisted into knots. The tree outside the chapel turned its branches inward, like fingers clenched in prayer, or grief. Then the sky broke. Not all at once, like parchment tearing. One long rip, from horizon to horizon. Through it, nothing, no stars, no moon, just a slow, bleeding dark. Not black, not void, but red, like clotting blood, like bruised flesh, like a sun that had become a wound. Some monks cried, others laughed. One began to sing a lullaby his mother used to hum, but his voice came out backward, like the air was folding time, like the song was trying to return to her. Aldric stepped into the chapel. The spiral on his arm glowed faintly, lit not by light but by memory. He stood where the altar used to be and said, "It's almost finished. The end isn't fire, it's forgetting." Then the sun disappeared entirely. No flash, no bang, no scream, just gone. And in its place, a single hole in the sky, wide, silent, and wet-looking, like an eye that had blinked too hard and left a scar. It watched, and the world watched back, until it became too much. One by one, the monks turned away. Not out of fear, out of instinct, because some truths you do not face, you feel them in your spine, in your teeth, in the pressure behind your eyes. You do not speak them. You survive them, barely. Still awake? Still looking at the ceiling, wondering why the light feels. What blooms in silence is not always meant to be seen. The garden was never sacred. It was functional. A place for carrots, cabbages, leeks, modest things that grew without complaint. The monks dug, planted, harvested. And in return, the soil kept its secrets, until it didn't. After the sun vanished, the garden began to breathe. Not metaphorically. The earth pulsed, a soft rise, a slower fall, as if the ground itself had lungs, or was mimicking those who once did. Brother Marek noticed first. He'd gone to check the parsnips. He never liked parsnips. He stepped into the soil and sank. Not far, just enough, like the dirt had softened to welcome him. Not mud, not rain-slicked, just receptive. He yanked his boot free, left it behind. It was never seen again. The plants were not rotting, but they were wrong. The lettuce grew teeth. The vines curled around each other like fingers in prayer, or fists in threat. One stalk of corn bloomed a flower that opened like a mouth. Inside, more petals. Soft, wet, humming. No bees came, no birds, just the fog. Curling low, whispering through rows of herbs no longer named in any book. Brother Olin tried to bless the ground. He knelt at the edge of the rosemary, drew a cross, sprinkled holy water, recited the rite. The plants bowed toward him, then laughed. Not aloud, not mockingly, but with a sound like rustling parchment and coughing earth. Olin screamed, fled, never returned. He now eats in silence, refuses anything green, even olives, especially olives. Aldric, of course, was waiting, already among the roots. Barefoot, smiling faintly, he plucked a mushroom the size of a skull, held it gently like a child. "This one remembers," he whispered. "It bloomed the day the bell rang." The garden paths moved. No one said so. No one admitted it. But Brother Rules swore the basil patch was 10 paces east yesterday, and this morning, 4 paces west. The garden gate, once creaking and polite, now stood slightly ajar no matter how it was latched, and always facing the crypts. Some nights they heard digging, not shovels, not claws, just the sound of displacement, of things rising through layers of time. And then silence. A silence so loud it pressed against your skull. The tomatoes turned black. The roots bled when pulled. The mint whispered. It spoke in small syllables. Things like, mine, still, again. One monk, eager to test his faith, plucked a leaf and placed it under his tongue. He convulsed, smiled, spoke in the voice of his mother, dead 10 years. "Why did you leave me in the soil?" They buried the monk. But his grave grew nothing. Not even weeds. The earth had grown selective. It no longer obeyed the calendar, no longer bent to prayers. One morning, the monks awoke to find the garden had rearranged itself. The carrots now bloomed vertically, their green tops hanging from the boughs of an ancient oak. The cabbage rows had twisted into spirals. The radishes glowed faintly beneath the soil, lighting the path like constellations buried too deep. Brother Emmerich attempted to till it. He struck the ground with his spade. It clanged, metal on metal. He dug further, found not stone, not bone, but a circle of rusted iron just beneath the basil. A lock, perhaps, or a lid, too wide to lift, too deep to unearth. When he reached to touch it, the vines lashed upward and pulled him down. He lived, but his eyes now bloom moss, and he speaks only in verbs. Aldric wrote again. He'd been quiet for days. Now, a new page, not in ink, in pollen. Yellow dust settled into runes, shapes that changed when stared at too long. The page smelled like spring and blood. He titled it, The First Root. Then the garden began to grow things that had never been planted. A hand, perfectly embalmed, cupping a clove of garlic, a statue's head blindfolded, mouth full of honeycomb, a spine twisting upward like a stalk, its vertebrae lined with tiny purple flowers. The monks started walking wider paths around the garden. Some moved their cots closer to the chapel, some stopped eating entirely, but Aldric only watched, and the garden only grew. Brother Miko tried to burn it. At midnight, alone, he poured oil, struck flint, the flame rose and turned green. He stepped back, but the fire stepped forward. Not heat, not light, just hunger. The flame crawled across the garden and stopped, right at the center, where no plant grew, a perfect circle of ash. Inside it, a sapling, white, pulsing. It was not there the next morning, but the circle remained, smoldering, whispering. Brother Jaron left the abbey that day, walked into the hills, didn't say goodbye. He left behind his journal, inside one entry, "The garden is dreaming, and it dreams in us." Still tending your own garden? Still sure the earth loves you back? Then remember, soil is not loyal, it does not forget, it simply waits, and when it dreams, it does so hungry. Sleep now, plant nothing tonight, let the garden rest, lest it remember how to open. There is no silence in a place where words remember how to breathe. It began with the old book, it always does. The Psalter had been kept behind glass in the chapel's northern transept, untouched for years, too fragile, too revered. They said it had been transcribed by a blind monk with no tongue, each line immaculate, each note precise. He had bled from his ears the day it was finished. Some said that was sacrifice, others said it was simply what the page demanded. Either way, no one sang from it anymore, until it began to sing from itself. Brother Aldric was the first to hear it. He'd come in late, slipping past Compline, hoping for quiet. Instead, he found a voice, soft, untrained, familiar. The sound came from the shelf. The book was shut but shut. He leaned in, the pages fluttered, not from wind. There was none. They turned on their own, stopped at Psalm 77. The waters saw thee, O God, the waters saw thee. They were afraid. The depths also were troubled. The page rippled, and the air changed. He told no one, not out of fear, out of guilt. He'd heard his own voice in the chant, but he had never sung that song, not aloud. By the next evening, 3 monks had reported hearing music. Not flutes, not harp, voices polyphonic, layered, complex, but directionless. It didn't echo, didn't rise, didn't fall. It simply filled the room, as if the walls had begun to hum their own hallelujahs. Brother Jareth tried to locate the source. He followed the sound through the scriptorium, into the crypt, past the refectory, everywhere. Nowhere. He pressed his ear to the floor, said it was coming up. He wept when he said it. Not in fear, in recognition. "It's my mother's voice," he whispered. "She died when I was 5. The books began to shed, their bindings loosened, their pages curled. Some bled ink, others grew soft with moisture, like they'd been crying. One volume, the Book of Hours, hummed steadily for 3 days, then burst into flame. Not hot, not wild, just bright and wrong. Inside the ashes they found a single word etched into the stone shelf: sing. The novices tried reading aloud. At first it worked. They chose random psalms, chanted softly, the abbey calmed, the shadows retreated, but then the words changed, mid-sentence, mid-note. One novice read, "Make a joyful noise unto the Lord," and the page twisted in his hands. The ink bled into new lines. "Make a hollow sound unto the earth, let the silence devour." He dropped the book. It kept chanting without him. Brother Norvin awoke at matins to find verses etched into his walls, not carved, written, in his own hand. He had no ink, no memory, but each line was flawless and wet, still drying. The chapel's echo turned cruel. If you whispered, the walls whispered back, but never the same words, sometimes louder, sometimes older. One monk tried reciting the Lord's Prayer. The walls repeated it in Greek, then Latin, then in a voice that sounded like a dying animal remembering how to speak. The Psalter flipped its own pages now. Each dawn, a new song, a new voice, and not always a monk's. Sometimes children, sometimes women. Once, something with gills. The air smelled of brine for hours. Aldric came to the chapel, stood before the glass, watched the book turn itself to Psalm 23. But the words had changed, not mistranslated, morphed. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death," had become, "Yea, though I dwell within the marrow of the world's last hymn." Aldric nodded, spoke softly. "It remembers too much." The choir loft collapsed on the 3rd night of singing. No one was inside. But the air rang with six-part harmony. When the monks climbed the rubble, they found no voices. Just a single feather, black, glass-like, embedded with Latin script that read, "We never left." Brother Felix began to write music in his sleep. He'd rise each morning with hands stained, notes scrawled across his arms, his sheets, the walls of his cell. When performed, they triggered memories the monks didn't own, visions of deserts, frozen rivers, oceans beneath stone. One monk remembered drowning. He'd never seen water. Another remembered childbirth. He was a man. They stopped trying to sing, stopped trying to read, but the songs persisted. At Vespers, a new melody would rise, always faint, always mournful. It came from the walls, not just the chapel, everywhere, refectory, dormitory, even the privy. Always one step behind you. Like something forgotten that still knows your name. Aldric took the psalter into the courtyard, laid it on a stone, opened it to a blank page, waited. It filled itself, line by line, a psalm no one had ever read. The ink shimmered. The page smelled like thunder and memory. A house remembers what it was before it became a home. The abbey had always groaned. Stone settles, wood warps, air slips through cracks you didn't know existed. It was the sound of old places remembering their shape. But now, it wasn't groaning, it was breathing. Brother Willem first heard it in the east cloister. He paused mid-step, heart snagged on silence. Then came the exhale. Not wind, not draft. A slow, heavy sigh, as if the mortar between the stones had lungs. He pressed his ear to the wall, felt warmth, a pulse, and then the inhale. It didn't stop. Every hall, every stairwell, every cell, the walls rose. The walls fell, subtle at first, enough to move dust, to shift shadows, then more. Wooden beams creaked like ribs, tiles moaned under pressure, windows fogged from the inside. Brother Rennet nailed his window shut. By morning, the nails had turned to teeth. The walls began to shift, not crumble, not collapse, just subtly realign. A corridor stretched a little longer. A stairwell now twisted slightly to the left. A door that once opened into the library now led to a blank wall. When you turned around, the door was gone. Brother Matthias got lost on the way to his own cell. He swore he knew the path. 12 steps past the refectory, third door on the right. But the hallway bent now, and the floor sloped, and the lamps flickered out when he passed. He found himself in a room that did not exist on any abbey map. Inside, a single bed, a basin of ink, and carvings, thousands of them, on every inch of stone. Each one, a name. Not his, but each one whispered back, present. The abbey creaked at odd hours, always just after you breathed, as if it was listening, matching you, practicing. Brother Rule began muttering that he could feel the bricks watching him. He stuffed rags into the cracks, hung blankets over bare stone. He still froze at night, not from cold, from awareness. Like the walls were deciding how best to hold him. He stopped sleeping, then stopped blinking. The last time anyone saw him, he was hugging a column, whispering, "You remember, you remember, you remember." Then the faces appeared, just one at first, in the stone near the apse, small, barely there, but unmistakably human. Mouth agape, eyes wide, like someone trapped just beneath the surface. A novice touched it. It smiled. The novice hasn't spoken since, but he hums the Alleluia backwards. By the next dawn, there were 6 more. Smaller, more detailed, some with closed eyes, some with mouths open in song. Aldric said nothing. He merely pressed his palm to one, nodded, and walked away with dust in his hair and a bruise that looked like scripture. The choir stalls twisted inward, pews pulled toward the altar, groaning like old teeth grinding in sleep. The altar itself drooped. Stone softened. Its corners curled like wax in heat. One monk dared sit upon it. He sank, not all at once, slowly, like the stone accepted him. By the time they pulled him out, he was weeping. It showed me the foundations. There are bones beneath bones beneath bones. They tried to bless the walls. Holy water turned to vapor. Chalk lines bent of their own will. Incense smoke curled into symbols, then words, then a language no one recognized. Except Aldric. He simply whispered, "It remembers Latin's father." In the library, shelves leaned toward readers. The books no longer rested flat. They pulsed, shifted. One tome breathed against Brother Fell's cheek. He burned it. The smoke sang his name. The ceiling in the scriptorium began to drip, not water, ink. Thick, slick with intent. The monks placed buckets. The ink spelled messages, short ones. Stay. Inside. Not yet. Almost. One day it spelled out, "I know your handwriting." Brother Garrett never wrote again. The floor of the nave cracked. Beneath it, not soil, but a staircase, smooth, curved, inhaling dust. They didn't go down, but the air that came up smelled of copper, lilies, and milk teeth. Aldric walked barefoot through the cloisters, tapping the stone with one finger, listening. At one point, he pressed his ear to the ground and whispered, "Yes, that's the one. That's where you kept it." No one asked what it was. No one wanted to know. Then came the heartbeat. Not yours, not the abbey's. Both. The stone thumped in time with the monks' chests. Slower, then faster. It confused their prayers, interrupted chants, made rhythm impossible. Some began to stutter, some began to match it. The abbey's walls swelled, like lungs full of song. Brother Nikon, deaf since birth, began to hear. He said it was like whispering sand, or breath behind. When a table sets itself, it is not for the living. There were no bells, no clanging summons, no call to refectory, no brother reading aloud the rule of Saint Benedict, only the smell, warm bread, stewed apples, charred meat. It drifted into cells, under doors, through mortar. A scent so rich it pulled even the dying from their blankets. Brother Oswin, who hadn't eaten in 3 days, sat upright. Brother Hale, whose teeth had loosened, licked his lips. They did not ask who was cooking, they simply followed the smell. The refectory glowed, candlelit though no one had lit them. Long wax tapers lined the tables, their flames still, unwobbling. The room should have been cold, but it was warm, not inviting, just aware. Like the room had been waiting for company. For years. The table was set, perfectly. Plates arranged by size, spoons polished to reflection, bread sliced into even loaves, each slice resting on linen napkins embroidered with initials. No one's initials, just letters the monks could not read. Not Roman, not Greek. Older. Hungrier. At the head of the table sat a bowl of salt, and beside it a goblet of wine so dark it reflected no light. Aldric stood in the doorway, smiling. Of course. It remembers the Last Supper, he said, but not the ending. They hesitated. Who cooked this? Who prepared the table? No fire had burned in the kitchen for days. No pantry stocked. No water drawn. And yet, here it was. Steam, aromas, abundance. The kind monks only dreamt of in winter. Brother Crispin touched a crust, warm, soft. He looked around, waited. Nothing stirred, so he ate, just one bite. He wept. Not from joy, from recognition. "My father's rye," he whispered. He used to bake it on feast days. He hadn't tasted it in 40 years. His father died the same week he joined the order. Brother Hale reached for a fig, bit in, his mouth filled with salt, not sea salt, blood salt. He spat it out. The fig grinned, or seemed to. It pulsed once, split open. Inside, a tiny black tongue, still moving. Some sat, some fled. Some wept in corners, unable to resist the scent. The bread now smelled like comfort, the meat like childhood, the fruit like first love. But when you bit in, it remembered you, and bit back. The wine moved, not spilled, not stirred. It trembled in the goblets, rhythmic, like breath or heartbeats. Brother Silas leaned in to sniff. The wine rose to meet him, touched his lip. He fell backward, convulsed, whispered, "It's a chalice of memory. It serves what you forgot." They carried him out. He refused to open his mouth for 3 days. Brother Heron tried to pray over the table. He raised his hands, spoke the blessing. Halfway through, his voice reversed. The words curdled in his throat. He choked, coughed, and the loaf in front of him finished the sentence. The walls didn't close in, they leaned, closer. The candle flames bent toward the plates. The floor hummed, faintly, a lullaby, in minor key, a song meant to be forgotten. Then the knives arrived. No one brought them, no one saw them placed. But each setting had one, bone-handled, worn, but sharp. Each monk stared at his reflection, but saw another face. Younger, older, gone. One brother screamed, said he saw his own corpse grinning up at him, mouth full of earth. He did not stay for dessert. Aldric walked the length of the table, nodded at each chair, paused, whispered, "They're not here for food. They're here to feed." The feast began to rot, not visibly. Smells soured, apples wilted, meat grayed, but only when watched. If you looked away, it restored, glorious, steaming, fresh. Look back, spoiled, maggot-filled, slick with decay. The room was uncertain, or testing. Brother Duran stood, declared the meal a blasphemy, smashed his plate. The table blinked and reset. Perfect again. A smile is not always joy. Sometimes it's the only thing left. They found him beneath the bell tower, cross-legged, hands folded in his lap, back straight as if he'd just finished prayer, and smiling. Not wide, not maniacal, just a small, even curve, lips pale, corners soft, still like he'd been smiling for hours. Brother Anselm had never been remarkable, quiet, polite, forgettable. He tended the bees, he mended habits, he hummed during chores. A background figure in a place that worshipped silence. He never asked questions. He never cried. He never spoke out of turn, until he did. It started 3 nights ago. The abbey had settled into a rhythm of ruin, walls breathing, ink bleeding, rooms that shouldn't exist. And then Anselm began to laugh, softly, only at night, in his cell, not manic, not loud, just a light chuckle, like he was remembering a joke only he had heard. Brother Ovid heard it first, said it wasn't mocking, said it wasn't even human. It sounded like relief. Anselm began to write, not on parchment, on walls, on floorboards, on the undersides of tables, symbols, spirals, sentences in dead dialects. When asked what they meant, he smiled. I'm writing back. To what? No one knew. But the walls paused when he passed, the ink ceased its drip, the hallways unbent, just for a moment, as if the abbey respected him, or feared him, or remembered him. He began to wear only white, tunic, rope belt, no shoes. He walked barefoot across stone, never flinched, never bruised. His feet grew pale, smooth, untouched, like the ground refused to harm him. He stopped blinking, stopped eating, and yet his skin glowed faintly, his breath came easy. His eyes never reddened. He wasn't dying, he was dimming, like a candle about to reveal its secret. One morning the Psalter refused to open, its pages stuck fast, its spine bent backward, until Anselm approached. He touched the cover, it sighed, and flipped open to a blank page. The monks gasped, the ink rose, line after line of silent verse, blooming like mold. Anselm read it and smiled. It's time. No one followed him that night. They didn't have to. The abbey showed the way. Doors unlocked, candles lit themselves, steps echoed in patterns that hummed direction. He climbed the bell tower alone. The wind did not blow, the moon did not rise, just a stillness, like breath held between verses. The next morning, they found him. His smile hadn't faded, his body was cold, but not stiff. He sat as if waiting for an answer, as if listening to something far away, something only he could hear. In his lap sat the chalice, empty, but damp. Its rim smelled faintly of honey, brine, and soil. At his feet, moss bloomed in the shape of a circle. Around him, nothing grew. Brother Mathis tried to lift the chalice. It stung like cold fire, left a mark on his palm, a spiral of red, which itched, then pulsed. He bandaged it, but it still glowed through the linen. They buried Anselm beneath the olive tree, or tried. The soil resisted, turned hard, then wet.